My friend and fellow author Blair Lynn remembers the moment the floor dropped out beneath her. What followed were panic attacks, ER visits, and waves of anxiety so intense they left her trembling, breathless, and afraid she might die. As a Christian, she knew she should cast her cares on God, but she didn't know how. In the depths of fear and discouragement, simple answers and spiritual cliches fell flat. There was no quick fix, no bypassing the valley. In Made to Tremble, Blair shares how she learned to walk with God through her anxiety, not around it. With scripture, story, and raw honesty, she shows what it means to embrace our weakness, not as failure, but as the place where God meets us most tenderly. This is a book for anyone who feels overwhelmed, afraid, or unsure if faith can hold in the storm. Through Blair's story, discover the peace of God and a deeper awe of the God of peace. Get your copy at madetotremble.com. The Sing hymnal, from award-winning hymn writers Keith and Kristen Getty, is a rich collection of classic and contemporary hymns created to deepen worship, foster unity in the church, and proclaim the hope that we have in Christ. Alongside beloved hymns, you'll also find psalms paired with songs, liturgical readings, and helpful indices, making this hymnal a lasting resource for families and congregations alike. Pick up your copy wherever books are sold, or get 30% off at crossway.org/gettyhymnal with a free Crossway Plus account. You are listening to the Confronting Christianity podcast, and I'm here with my friend, Dr. Alan. Well, I was going to say Dr. Alan Noble, but apparently there's an O, which I'm going to have to ask you about in a second, Alan. Alan is an associate professor of English at Oklahoma Baptist University, and I'm going to tell you in a minute why both those things please me. He's published articles in The Atlantic, The Gospel Coalition, First Things, Christianity Today, and he's the author of 3 books, most recently on Getting Out of Bed, The Burden and Gift of Living. Alan, first, tell us, what is the O, the ominous O, by which you do not go?
The O stands for Orville.
Do you know what? That's so exciting. Just before you said that, I thought, I hope it's Orville, and I'll tell you why. My husband, who's from Oklahoma, hence why I'm excited that you're at Oklahoma Baptist, his beloved grandfather lived long enough to see us married, but died when I was pregnant with our first child. And we didn't yet know that Miranda was going to be a girl. So we thought, it might be nice to have some sort of tribute to lovely Papa in the name of our child if it turns out to be a son. But Papa's name was Don, and Donald just wasn't quite the name we wanted to go for. So I asked Brian, he said, we could always use Papa's middle name. And I said, what's that? Sort of excitement in my voice. And the answer was Orville. And like you, apparently, we didn't think that was necessarily the name to go for. So.
Yeah, I was named after my grandfather too. So,
wow.
Yeah, my parents decided it was the name to go for.
Okay.
So.
Did they intend for it to be the name that you went by, or did they intend? Okay. But you said no, Alan is
yep.
Fine, thanks.
Yep. As a kid, I decided Alan is better than Orville. Yeah. And it's spelled Orval, Orval.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I was thinking Orville, but maybe.
Right. That's the normal spelling.
Anyway, okay. So we've got over the weirdness of your first given name that we will not be using or mentioning hereafter.
Yeah.
So I'm excited that you live in Oklahoma, and I'm also excited that you're a professor of English, because I spent 7 mostly happy years. I mean, the English part was happy. Obviously, I had all the normal ups and downs of a 18 to 25-year-old when I was studying the subject, but English literature is exceedingly close to my heart. What was it that first made you want to study English for the rest of your life?
So I was in an English, I was homeschooled, and I finished high school early because I didn't know what else to do. And so I started it, I was just finished, and I was about 15 and a half, and I started attending community college, and I was listless, just taking class after class. And I took this composition class, which was taught with novels, which is pedagogically not the best way to teach composition, but my composition teacher really loved novels and he wanted to teach literature. So he taught us novels. He actually taught one of my favorite novels, Blood Meridian, if not my favorite novel, by Cormac McCarthy, my favorite author. And I realized that he had the opportunity to sit down and discuss most of life's interesting questions with his students. He got to delve into love and justice and beauty and the horrors of life and belief and disbelief and all these meaningful questions he got to explore every day. And politics, just anything in the human experience was literature's purview.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want that guy's job. That sounds fascinating. I want to be able to do that because that's what I care about, the human experience. That is beautiful. Literature is beautiful. And so I fell in love at that point and haven't really looked back since.
I am part of a book club where we mostly read, not exclusively, but it tends to be contemporary bestsellers. And I'm partly part of it because, well, one of my best friends runs it, which is, a good enough reason. But aside from that, I'm someone who dispositionally probably wouldn't read any contemporary fiction if I was just left to my own devices. Like I forged 7 years in college of pure poetry / drama. And the only thing that I did one paper that was like 1930 to the present day where I studied T.S. Eliot, which is basically like studying everything that's come before T.S. Eliot. Anyway, so left to my own devices, I wouldn't read anything by anyone alive. However, we have just this past month read a book which I thought was outstanding, unlike almost all the other books we've read, which was My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry. Have you come across that?
No, I haven't heard of it.
It's exceedingly good, and it's about a 7-year-old girl and her relationship with her grandmother. Anyway, that is my latest, greatest sort of favorite read. So now I want to know yours. What are you reading, or have you just finished reading that you would recommend?
So I don't actually often read fiction because I'm often reading for class. So I don't get to read outside of that.
Yes.
So when I'm reading, I'm usually reading for research. So I'm reading Democracy and Solidarity by James Davison Hunter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm reading that, and so far it's brilliant.
What is your favorite thing to teach your students?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably the Four Quartets by T.S. Eliot.
Oh, yeah. That pleases me. Anything by T.S. Eliot.
Yeah.
Pleases me.
Yeah.
You recently, well, I think a few months ago now, published a book called On Getting Out of Bed. And I want to talk about that for a couple of reasons. One is that I spend quite a lot of time on this podcast talking with people about their own experiences of faith and how it's shaped their life. And I'm about to write a book myself on the mental and physical health benefits of going to church every week, like being sort of actively religious, not just in a convictional sense, but in a like practical sense. And it turns out that people who go to church every week are, happier, healthier, and longer lived, less likely to be depressed, more than likely to recover from depression, like all the things than people who don't attend religious services. But when I talk about that, I also always want to hold space for the fact that many faithful brothers and sisters throughout the last 2,000 years of Christian history, including some of the most fruitful kind of gospel ministers, like Charles Spurgeon in the UK, for example, have struggled profoundly with depression. And so I wanted to talk to you about your book, because I know that in that book you're helping people to think through from a Christian perspective, how do we even relate to the experience of depression? What difference does it make for a follower of Jesus if you are struggling today to even get out of bed?
Yeah. That's the purpose of the book, is to think through that. And I'm glad you are making space for that, because that is so important. I struggle with OCD, and most experts think that Martin Luther probably struggled with OCD, scrupulosity specifically, because of his tendency to go back to his priest and ask for absolution again and again and again for the same sins. And until his priest had to tell him to stop doing it. it's a very scrupulosity.
Stop doing that and go launch a reformation.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's what he did. And in many ways, it's interesting to think about the relationship between his scrupulosity and the Reformation, actually. But yeah, I mean, there is a tension there. And what I would say is, one of the things that I end the book on is stressing that one of God's greatest gifts for us is actually the church. And in my own journey and in the journey that I've walked with others through their own mental illness and mental suffering, what I've experienced is that being with someone, having a community who will walk with you through suffering is one of the things that will get you through, that will help you. And I suspect that that's one of the reasons why people who are participating in religious activities are able to do better, have better mental health, is that they have a support system, because they're going to go through hardships as well. They're going to go through tragedies. They're going to go through suffering. That's part of the premise of my book, is that everyone at some point is going to go through some sort of mental affliction, whether it's a tragedy, you lose a loved one, whether it's acute depression, acute onset of depression or anxiety, or some sort of trauma, or it's a mental illness. Life's hard. And the church has known this for thousands of years. I mean, this is part of the human experience, is suffering. We suffer. The question is, what do you do with that suffering? How do you respond to that suffering? And I think our faith gives us a way to respond to that suffering that allows us to move forward rather than turn inward and fold up in on ourselves, because that's what anxiety and depression likes to do. Anxiety and depression likes to tell you need to turn inward on yourself and fold in, and your world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until you feel like you're suffocating. And what you need is your world to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the process of recovery.
It strikes me that one of the ironies of contemporary culture is, on the one hand, how desperate we are to give people support in terms of their mental health, and on the other hand, how much a lot of our sort of contemporary culture reinforces the idea that your life is all about you, and that really, you should actually spend a whole lot of time looking inside it, and what you'll find there is good and true and beautiful. And if it isn't, then there's probably it's no fault of yours. It's only something that maybe has come outside that people have pressed onto you. And there's a sort of continual self-referential move that I think is taught even in school. I mean, I know it, like my kids are in now, actually, for the first time, my kids are respectively in high school, middle school, and elementary school. So I've sort of got one in each.
Oh, that's fun.
One in each lane, and that focus on the self that I think is prevalent in our culture today is sort of, ironically, in some ways, the last thing that people need if they're struggling with their identity and with their mental health, and with we need something to revolve around that's much bigger than ourselves. And our own kind of dreams and aspirations. And at the same time, I'm sort of curious for your reflections as someone who's been a Christian for a long time, and as someone who's struggled in this particular way for a long time. What have you found to be the most and least helpful ways in which fellow Christians have related to you or related to others who are struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, so the least helpful ways would be, have you just prayed about it? Or suggesting that this is just a spiritual deficiency in myself, or the flip side, suggesting that this is just a biological thing, suggesting that it's just biological, that it has no spiritual element to it, right? Either reductive move, saying that there's no spiritual dimension to this, that my spiritual life has nothing to say, or that the biological is as no relevance. Those have been unhelpful. Lack of sympathy or empathy, I think, have been harmful. The most helpful things are people who will tell me truths that I need to hear, and I do talk about this in the book. Tell me objective truths that I need to hear about the world that I no longer believe because I start to believe the lies in my head. And this is what happens. This happens with lots of mental illnesses and not just formally diagnosed mental illnesses, lots of kinds of mental afflictions. Just when you feel down about yourself, you start to believe certain lies about the world and about yourself. I'm not good enough. I'm insufficient, whatever it might be. The world is not good. Tomorrow will not be a better day. Whatever it is. And oftentimes we need external voices to remind us of objective truths, that God created the world good, that he loves us, that he is caring for us, that he is providing for us, that he is the one preserving us, that he is the one guiding us, that he is the one making all things new, not us. And these kinds of truths that we can very easily lose sight of. And I've had people who, at very dark times that I've just had to call very quickly in a moment of panic. And, they've just prayed with me, or they've just reminded me of these fundamental truths, and they've made a world of difference because they grounded me. They reminded me. And it wasn't that they were getting into specifics. They weren't arguing with my mind and the content of my mind, because that can get tricky, right? They weren't arguing with me and whatever my delusional mind was telling me, but they were just reminding me, okay, here are the anchor points. Here's what's objectively true. You might not feel it, Alan, right? Because that's part of the problem, is that you have emotions which feel very strongly, so strongly that you believe them to be true, these things. But then you have reality. And so subjectively, you might feel that existence is meaningless and futile and ugly, and you have no purpose in life. But objectively, we know that's not true, that there is a God who loves us and who created us, and he is sustaining us moment by moment in an act of love. So we do have purpose. We do have meaning. That's radical. That's amazing. That's objective. That's outside of our heads. And sometimes we need people to just sit with us. And I've had people, another thing that's been very helpful is just, I've had people just come over and just sit with me, just be with me through difficult hours and check in on me. People just checking in. How are you doing? How was your week? How was your day?
Yeah.
Those are, I think, really important things.
What do you do when it feels like your spiritual life is crumbling? When trusted leaders fail, doubts rise, grief hits, and you don't know what to believe in anymore? In her new book, Someone to Believe In, Embracing the Saviour Who Stays the Same When Everything Else Changes, author and Bible teacher Courtney Reisig helps us to see Jesus' unshakable character. If you're not sure whether you believe in Jesus yet, or if your faith feels unsteady in the face of grieving, burnout, or disillusionment, this book invites you to encounter Jesus as the one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Get your copy of Someone to Believe In today at someonetobelievin.com. It's interesting you say that sense of meaninglessness and worthlessness and purposelessness is not true. It strikes me that that's only not true if Jesus is true.
Right.
That actually, if there is no God, and if God did not reveal himself in the person of his son who came to die for us and invite us into resurrection life with him, then actually your life and my life is completely pointless. We're just a bunch of atoms and molecules. At best we're mammals, but we have no future, and even our consciousness is basically a delusion. But if Jesus is the Lord, and if he did think you and I and anyone listening to this who trusts in him was worth dying for, then that completely changes. It's almost like the things you might believe at your lowest point in depression are true if there is no God. and if Jesus isn't the revelation of that God. But if he is,
yeah,
then they're profoundly untrue. And we need, as you point out, we need friends often to remind us of those truths when we're sort of struggling to access them. As you have related to the Bible, like, what are there particular books or passages or stories in the Bible that you have as like your go-to places when you're most struggling, or is it pretty eclectic?
I would say it's pretty eclectic. For me, I think the concept of offering our bodies as a living sacrifice is a powerful concept.
Do you want to unpack that for people for whom that is completely alien language?
Yes, yeah. So it can have various meanings, but I think one of the ways that I apply this to the concept of persevering through mental health issues is when I get out of bed and I am struggling to get out of bed, when it feels too difficult, I believe that is an act where I am offering my body as a living sacrifice. I am sacrificing the suffering that I'm carrying in getting out of bed, because my body is screaming, my mind is screaming, no, let's just give up. This is not worth going through. You're just going to fail, or whatever the negative thoughts are going through my head. I'm sacrificing those feelings as a way of worshiping God. And in a way, that's my spiritual form of sacrifice, just like the Old Testament sacrifices, not the same exactly, but in a figurative way, a sacrifice to God to honor him, to show him my love and devotion, to show him that I'm committed, that I believe what he said when he created me and said it is good, when he created the universe and said it is good. I believe that he meant that. I also believe that when he sustains me, that it is good. I believe that when he died for me, it is good. And I'm enacting those things. I'm embodying those things by getting out of bed and moving and eating breakfast and making coffee and feeding my kids and taking a walk and going to work. And there are these things that seem mundane, but there are times in your life when mundane things take a great deal of courage.
Yeah.
And in those moments, I think that's a spiritual act of worship. I think that's a spiritual act of worship, because I think it's a sacrifice. I think it's really sacrificial. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I think is so powerful about it is I think it's a testament to other people. I talk about this in the book. I think it's a testament to other people, because the people around you, you don't even know how many people around you are watching you to see how you are going to react to suffering. But there are people around you who are watching you, and there's your children, your family members, your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors are watching. How will you respond to suffering, to persecution, to trouble? And when you choose to respond to suffering with resilience, with perseverance, by embracing the life God has given you, what that communicates is this life is worth living even if it's hard, even when it's difficult. Because fundamentally, at its core, this life is good because it was created by God. And that's a profound witness. That's a witness that God is good, that he is in charge, and he has called us to embrace life and to live it for him. And so that's an exciting thing. And I think that's an important point, because when you go through periods of depression and anxiety, one of the things that happens to you is you lose motivation. You feel like, I don't have any purpose in life. And what I want to say is, gosh, if you can just do those what feels like mundane things, those basic things like getting out of bed and feeding yourself and showering and going to work, you're actually doing a great thing. You are bearing witness to the goodness of existence, and that's pretty miraculous.
Yeah, this puts me in mind of a beautiful moment in the Gospels when Jesus sees people coming out of the temple and rich people throwing some money into the temple sort of treasury, and then this poor widow coming and putting this tiny little coin in the treasury, and he calls his disciples and he says, look at this, she's given much more than all those guys just gave, because even though it's sort of objectively, sort of in monetary terms, it's far less, they gave from the extra that they had, and she gave all that she had.
Right.
It was what she gave. And it just strikes me that there'll be times in our lives, and for some of us this will be like very recurrent, and for others it may be sort of more occasional, where we can feel like we have nothing. I mean, what do we have? Like,
right.
It's getting out of bed. It's taking a small step relationally. It's something which we could easily just get discouraged by, because how is this making any difference in the world? And how pathetic I am that I can't do more than this, whatever this is. But actually, from Jesus's perspective, if this is what we have today and we are giving it to him, he can do extraordinary things with that. Like, it's actually, in many ways, it's more than the person who's being, wildly productive in external terms,
right,
without that level of struggle. Because at the end of the day, Jesus doesn't need any of our money or any of our time or any of our efforts to spread his gospel. He could do all of these things purely miraculously without us, and yet he chooses to work with us and through us because he loves us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One of the ideas that I try to get across in the book is that most of the reasons that people try to choose to live life in this world is for some kind of use value. They usefulness to the world or usefulness to the flesh, right? Some usefulness, but we can have no use value to God because he doesn't need us for anything, but he just made us for his own good pleasure, just because he loves us. And that's exciting. That's great, because we can't stop being useful to him because he never made us to be useful to in the first place. Yeah. And that sort of lowers that kind of pressure, because we're taught so deeply to perform and to be useful in order to be validated. And that's not why we were created.
Yeah, I love that. I'm working at the moment on a commentary on Colossians and Philemon, 2 letters that the Apostle Paul wrote to the same Christian community, but just sort of different elements of it. And there's this incredible moment in his letter to the Colossians when he tells them to set their minds on the things that are above and not on earthly things. And he has a sort of really weird rationale for this. He says, you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, you also will appear with him in glory. And I find those words so powerful, because I think it's easy for us, and perhaps it's easy especially the older that we get, it's easy for us to feel like, you know what, I probably missed on making the biggest deal of my life. Like, there was probably some hope or aspiration I had as a kid that I haven't fulfilled, or there are people I went to college with or whatever who seem to be doing so much more impressive things than I am. And we can get into this mindset of like, my life is not going to measure up to my expectations or somebody else outside of me expectations that I really care about. And Paul's like, no. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're dead, number one. And you're also so alive that nothing can get you. And one day when Jesus comes back, you will be revealed in glory. Like, there's nothing, like your future is unimaginably bright, regardless of how badly today goes, how badly this week goes, how badly this year goes, how badly, your entire life goes. There is that certainty, that hope of a wonderful future that's almost like the film where everything's going terribly wrong and then suddenly there's a sort of massive twist at the end and everything works out happy. Like, the Christian message is in part that, yes, everything's going to work out happy for those who are in Christ, who've put their trust in him. We can kind of draw consolation from that in the day-to-day. Yeah. As you think about the people who you wrote this book for, I guess is it primarily like fellow followers of Jesus who are struggling in this way, what would you say to someone who is not yet a Christian, or maybe would once have called themselves a Christian and is now sort of unsure or skeptical of Christianity, and perhaps struggles in their life, depression or other forms of suffering have really kind of thrown them in terms of their faith made them think that Christianity is probably not worth pursuing, what would you want to say to them?
I think what I would want to say is that part of the recovery that they're looking for is explained in the Christian faith. That part of the hope that they are looking for is explained in the hope of the gospel. That the answer to, as you were talking about earlier, this longing for ultimate meaning that is opposed to those darkest thoughts that you might have, that gets resolved in the Christian faith. And that's part of the beauty. And so what I try to do in the book is describe the beautiful way the Christian faith offers the hope of recovery. I don't want to use recovery flippantly as if there's not going to be any struggles anymore, but offers hope of perseverance. I'll say perseverance. Sometimes that looks like recovery for some people, but sometimes it just looks like persevering, but looks like a way forward as opposed to being stuck and unable to move, which is the worst place to be, or spiraling downward, which I guess is actually the worst place to be. And that's part of the beauty of the Christian faith, is that it offers an explanation for that hope that being, existence, is beautiful and good because it was created beautiful and good. And that you partake of that beauty and that goodness when you choose to get out of bed and you choose to participate in the life that God has given you, and you choose to see that Christ has died for you and that there is meaning and purpose to your life. Even when your emotions and your mind work against you and tell you that it's not true, that your life is meaningless.
Last question for you, Alan. How did you come to be a follower of Jesus, and what is it that keeps you clinging to Christ? You've answered some of that already, but what is it that keeps you clinging to Christ even today, even as an English professor, a well-known breed of skeptics, English professors in my experience?
It's true. So I was born into a Christian family. So I've been a believer as long as I can remember. I sort of made the faith my own when I was a teenager, as it were, but I've always been a believer as long as I can remember. What keeps me in the faith is the ability of Christianity to explain its explanatory power, its ability to explain my heart, its ability to explain beauty, its ability to explain wonder, its ability to explain suffering and sin, its ability to explain evil, its ability to explain my desire for redemption and my need for redemption, its ability to explain the world that I'm confronted with is what makes Christianity true, not true, but is what keeps me in the faith. It's explanatory power.
Thanks so much, Alan, for joining me and for sharing all of that. You guys can grab a copy of Alan's book on getting out of bed, wherever books are sold. You have been listening to the Confronting Christianity podcast. You can follow us on Twitter X or Instagram. You can leave a review on iTunes and perhaps include there a topic or a question that you'd like to see explored in a future episode. And I wish you a thoroughly beautiful and meaningful and life-giving week until I speak into your earphones, earpods, whatever they're called, this time next week.